Don't move! Keep your hands where I can see them!
Officer, this is my driveway. I'm loading my own vehicle.
You don't load bags like that unless you're up to something! Who do you think you are?
I'm a homeowner. I haven't committed a crime. You're escalating this for no reason.
Don't tell me how to do my job! Turn.
Officer Derek Wolf thought he knew exactly what he was looking at. Black male, nice neighborhood, loading bags into an SUV. In his mind, the equation was simple: burglary in progress. He had made dozens of stops just like this one over his 9-year career, approaching black men in upscale areas with his hand already resting on his weapon, his assumptions already hardened into certainty, never questioned, never challenged, never wrong in his own estimation. But when he pulled his patrol car to the curb on Ridgewood Drive on that bright Saturday morning and approached the man loading tactical gear into the back of a black Tahoe, he made the worst mistake of his career. Senior Chief Petty Officer Marcus Smith wasn't burglarizing anyone's home. He was a 16-year Navy SEAL veteran with 3 combat deployments to Afghanistan and Iraq, a Bronze Star recipient, a Purple Heart holder, an elite warrior who had served his country in the most dangerous conditions imaginable, who had led men into combat and brought them home alive, who had sacrificed years of his life protecting the freedoms that every American enjoys. And he was loading his own gear into his own car in front of his own house. The house he had purchased 3 years ago after his promotion to senior chief. The house where he lived with his wife, Denise, a middle school principal, and their 2 children. The house in the neighborhood where he paid property taxes, mowed his lawn, and waved to neighbors who respected him as both a military hero and a good man. But Officer Wolf didn't see any of that. He saw skin color and made his judgment. He saw a black man where a black man supposedly didn't belong and decided that was enough. What he didn't realize, what he couldn't have anticipated, was that his body camera was recording everything. Every assumption, every dismissal, every moment of the unlawful arrest that followed. The footage would become the centerpiece of a federal civil rights lawsuit that would cost the city of Riverside $875,000 and end Wolf's career in disgrace. Officer Derek Wolf had been with the Riverside Police Department for 9 years, building what his supervisors called an impressive record of proactive policing. He was known for making stops that other officers might hesitate on, for patrolling upscale neighborhoods with particular vigilance, for trusting his instincts about who belonged and who didn't. His arrest numbers were solid. His supervisors praised his initiative. On paper, he was exactly the kind of officer the department wanted on the streets. But beneath that polished reputation lay a pattern that should have ended his career years earlier. 11 formal complaints had been filed against Wolf over 7 years. 11 separate incidents where citizens alleged racial profiling, harassment, and discriminatory enforcement. The complaints told a consistent story: Wolf targeting black men in affluent neighborhoods, demanding identification without cause, treating lawful presence as inherently suspicious. A black real estate agent showing homes to clients. A black contractor arriving for a scheduled job. A black teenager walking home from a friend's house. Each one stopped. Each one questioned. Each one made to feel like a criminal for existing in spaces Wolf believed they didn't belong. Every single complaint had been dismissed or resulted in nothing more than minor counseling. Internal affairs investigations that went nowhere. Supervisors who accepted Wolf's explanations without scrutiny. A department culture that praised aggressive enforcement without examining who bore the brunt of that aggression. The data was damning for anyone willing to look. Over the past 3 years alone, Wolf had conducted 47 stops of black individuals in Riverside's wealthier neighborhoods. Not one had resulted in a legitimate arrest. Not one had uncovered actual criminal activity. 47 innocent people detained, questioned, and humiliated based on nothing but skin color and neighborhood. But no one had looked. No one had connected the dots. No one had stopped Derek Wolf before he encountered Marcus Smith. Senior Chief Petty Officer Marcus Smith had spent 16 years serving the United States of America in ways most citizens could never imagine. He had enlisted in the Navy at 19, driven by a desire to challenge himself and serve something greater. He survived the brutal selection process for basic underwater demolition, SEAL training, a program with an 80% attrition rate, and earned his Trident, joining the most elite special operations force in the world. 3 combat deployments followed: Afghanistan, Iraq, operations he still couldn't discuss, missions that remained classified, nights spent in hostile territory where a single mistake meant death. He had led teams into firefights, made split-second decisions under impossible pressure, and brought his men home alive. His Bronze Star recognized exceptional valor in combat. His Purple Heart marked the price he had paid, shrapnel wounds from an IED that still ached when the weather changed. Now 41, Marcus had transitioned to an instructor role at the Naval Special Warfare Training Facility 30 miles from Riverside. He was shaping the next generation of SEALs, passing on hard-won knowledge to young warriors who would carry the burden after him. It was demanding work, but it allowed him something he had rarely experienced in his career: stability. His wife Denise had stood beside him through every deployment, every missed birthday, every sleepless night, wondering if the knock at the door would bring a chaplain in dress whites. She was a middle school principal now, respected in the community, devoted to her students. Their children, Marcus Jr., 12, and Aaliyah, 9, were thriving in Riverside's excellent schools. 3 years ago, after Marcus's promotion to senior chief, they had purchased their home in Ridgewood Estates, a 4-bedroom house with a 2-car garage, a backyard where the kids could play, a neighborhood where they felt safe. They had earned it. Every sacrifice, every deployment, every year of service had led to this, a piece of the American dream. Marcus Smith had fought for his country in the most dangerous places on earth. He never expected the greatest threat to his dignity would come in his own driveway. The Saturday morning had dawned clear and bright, late spring sunshine warming the quiet streets of Ridgewood Estates. The temperature sat at a comfortable 72 degrees, the kind of perfect weather that brought neighbors out to wash cars and tend gardens. Sprinklers hissed on manicured lawns. Birds sang in the mature oak trees that lined the sidewalks. It was peaceful, suburban, safe. Marcus Smith had been awake since 5:30 a.m., his body still running on military time despite the weekend. He had a 2-week training exercise starting Monday at the Naval Special Warfare Facility, and he needed to pack his gear. Denise had taken the kids to her mother's house for the weekend, giving Marcus time to prepare without distraction. By 9:15 a.m., he was in his driveway loading the black Tahoe, sea bag with uniforms, tactical equipment cases, his worn pair of jungle boots that had seen 3 deployments, a garment bag holding his dress uniform for an awards ceremony scheduled at the end of the exercise. His Navy SEAL trident, the gold insignia that marked him as one of America's elite warriors, was clearly visible on the jacket hanging in the back seat. Military stickers adorned the rear window. A SEAL trident decal, a veteran emblem, a small American flag. Anyone who looked could see exactly who Marcus Smith was and what he represented. At 9:23 a.m., a 911 call was placed from a blocked number. The caller, voice calm and matter-of-fact, reported a suspicious black male possibly burglarizing a house on Ridgewood Drive. No specific address, no description of clothing. No details about what made the activity suspicious, just race and assumption wrapped in the language of concern. The dispatcher asked clarifying questions. What is he doing that seems suspicious? Can you describe what he's wearing? What house specifically? The caller provided nothing useful, just kept repeating, black male, loading bags, doesn't look like he belongs. The call was logged. A unit was dispatched. Officer Derek Wolf, already patrolling 2 streets away, responded immediately. Wolf's patrol car turned onto Ridgewood Drive at 9:27 a.m., his body camera already activated and recording. The late morning sun hung bright in a cloudless sky, flooding the street with perfect natural light. Every detail would be captured in sharp clarity: the green lawns, the stately homes, and the black man standing at the rear of a Tahoe in the driveway of 4127 Ridgewood Drive. Marcus was placing the last bag into the trunk when he heard the engine. He glanced over his shoulder and saw the patrol car slowing, then stopping directly in front of his house. His trained instincts registered the situation immediately. He had dealt with law enforcement countless times in his career: military police, base security, federal agents during classified operations. He knew how to handle himself. He turned to face the officer, keeping his hands visible, his posture non-threatening. 16 years of operating in hostile environments had taught him the value of calm. Wolf exited his vehicle with his hand already resting on his holstered weapon. His body camera captured his approach quick, aggressive, his footsteps heavy on the asphalt. The camera recorded his view. Marcus standing by the open trunk, wearing a gray navy t-shirt and khaki shorts, his muscular build evident, his expression composed. "Step away from the vehicle," Wolf commanded, his voice loud enough for neighbors to hear. "Put your hands where I can see them. Now." Marcus complied immediately, raising his hands to shoulder height and taking 2 slow steps back from the Tahoe. His movements were deliberate, controlled, designed to de-escalate. The body camera captured every moment in the unforgiving daylight. "Officer, I'm Senior Chief Petty Officer Marcus Smith, United States Navy," Marcus said, his voice steady and clear. "This is my house. I'm loading my car. I live here." He gestured slowly toward the front door, toward the house numbers clearly visible beside it, toward his entire life sitting in plain view. Wolf's camera recorded his response, a dismissive shake of his head, his hand still on his weapon, his posture unchanged. "Sure you do." Marcus kept his hands raised, his years of training overriding the anger building in his chest. "My wallet is in my back pocket," he said calmly. "I have my military ID and my driver's license. The license shows this address. Can I reach for it slowly?" Wolf nodded curtly, his hand still hovering near his weapon. His body camera recorded Marcus's deliberate movement, reaching back with 2 fingers, extracting a worn leather wallet, opening it with practiced care. Marcus held out his military identification card, the official Department of Defense credential that identified him as Senior Chief Petty Officer Marcus A. Smith, United States Navy. Wolf glanced at it for less than 2 seconds. His camera captured his own dismissive gesture, his hand waving the ID away like it was worthless. "Anyone can buy these online," Wolf said flatly. "Doesn't prove anything." Marcus's jaw tightened, but his voice remained level. "Then look at my driver's license." He held it out, the California license clearly displaying his photo, his name, and his address. 4127 Ridgewood Drive, Riverside, California. The same numbers visible on the house directly behind him. Wolf barely looked. His body camera recorded, his eyes flicking to the license and away again, his mind already made up. Evidence irrelevant. "For all I know, that's fake too," Wolf said. "We got a call about someone casing this neighborhood, loading bags into a car. Looks like burglary to me." "Casing the neighborhood?" Marcus repeated, disbelief breaking through his composure. "Officer, I've lived here for 3 years. I'm a Navy SEAL. I'm packing for a training exercise. My gear," he gestured toward the open trunk, toward the military equipment in plain view, toward the Trident decal on the window, "should make that obvious." "What's obvious?" Wolf cut him off, stepping closer. "Is that you're getting defensive. Innocent people don't get defensive." Marcus took a breath. "Remain calm. Don't escalate." The training that had kept him alive in combat zones now applied to his own driveway. He had seen situations spiral out of control. He had watched men die because someone lost their composure. He would not give this officer any excuse. At 9:34 a.m., a second patrol car arrived. Officer Tanya Reeves stepped out, her own body camera activated and recording. Her footage would provide the second angle, a wider view showing Marcus's house behind him, the military stickers on his vehicle, Wolf's aggressive stance. Reeves approached slowly, her expression shifting as she took in the scene. Her camera captured what Wolf's missed: the homeowner's calm demeanor, the visible military insignia, the complete absence of anything resembling criminal activity. "Derek," she said quietly, stepping beside her colleague, "what's the situation?" "Got a burglary call," Wolf replied, not taking his eyes off Marcus. "He claims he lives here. I'm not buying it." Reeves's camera recorded her glancing at the house, at the car, at the military ID still in Marcus's outstretched hand. Her footage captured her own discomfort, the slight furrow of her brow, the way she shifted her weight, the hesitation before she spoke. "Did you verify the address?" she asked carefully. "I don't need to verify anything," Wolf snapped. "I know what I'm looking at." Reeves said nothing more, but her body camera recorded everything, including her own silence when she should have spoken up. Wolf had heard enough. His mind was made up the moment he pulled onto Ridgewood Drive, and nothing, not military IDs, not driver's licenses, not the obvious truth standing right in front of him would change it. "Turn around," he ordered, reaching for his handcuffs. "Hands behind your back." Marcus stared at him in disbelief. "You're arresting me? For what?" "Suspicious activity and failure to comply with a lawful order." The words came out rehearsed, bureaucratic, the language of authority wielded without justification. "I've complied with every order you've given," Marcus said, his voice rising for the first time. "I've shown you identification. I've answered your questions. I've done everything right. What law have I broken?" Wolf stepped forward, handcuffs open. "Turn around, now, last warning." Marcus looked at Reeves, whose camera captured the plea in his eyes, the silent request for intervention, for someone to stop this madness. She looked away. Her footage recorded her own shoes, her own shame, her own failure to act. Marcus turned slowly, placing his hands behind his back. As the metal closed around his wrists, the click captured on both body cameras, he spoke directly into Wolf's lens, his voice steady despite everything. "My name is Senior Chief Petty Officer Marcus Anthony Smith. Service number 8-472-96153. United States Navy, 16 years of service. My address is 4127 Ridgewood Drive, Riverside, California, the house directly behind me. I am being arrested without probable cause, without evidence of any crime, in my own driveway. I am asserting my Fourth Amendment rights. This arrest is unlawful." The statement was precise, deliberate. The words of a man trained to document, to record, to survive. Neighbors had begun emerging from their homes. Wolf's camera captured them gathering on lawns, faces, showing confusion, concern, and growing anger. A white man in his 60s strode across the street, his posture military rigid, his expression furious. "What the hell is going on here?" he demanded. "Sir, step back," Wolf warned. "This is police business. I'm Colonel Richard Hayes, United States Marine Corps, retired," the man shot back, his voice carrying the authority of 30 years in uniform. "And that man you're handcuffing is my neighbor, a Navy SEAL, a goddamn war hero. He lives here. What are you doing?" "Sir, I won't ask again. I've known Marcus Smith for 3 years," Hayes continued, ignoring the warning. "He's loaded that car a dozen times for training exercises. Everyone on this street knows him. What possible reason do you have for this?" Wolf's camera recorded his jaw tightening, his face flushing. He had no answer. He offered none. At 9:52 a.m., a silver Honda Accord turned onto Ridgewood Drive. Reeves's camera captured the car slowing, then stopping abruptly in the middle of the street. Denise Smith stepped out, her face shifting from confusion to horror in a single heartbeat. "Marcus?" Her voice cracked. "Marcus!" She ran toward the driveway, her footsteps captured on audio, her breathing ragged. Reeves stepped into her path, hands raised. "Ma'am, please stay back." "That's my husband," Denise screamed, the sound piercing through both body camera microphones. "That's my house! What are you doing? Why is he in handcuffs?" She pulled out her phone, hands shaking violently, and began dialing. Both cameras captured her frantic voice as she reached someone, a lawyer, a family member, the beginnings of the storm that would follow. "They're arresting Marcus," she sobbed. "In our driveway. Please, please come. Please help us." The patrol car pulled into the Riverside Police Department at 10:17 a.m. Wolf's body camera recorded the journey, 25 minutes of silence. Marcus sitting in the back seat with his hands cuffed behind him, his face turned toward the window, revealing nothing. The camera captured glimpses of his expression in the rearview mirror, controlled, composed, the mask of a man trained to endure far worse than this. Inside the station, Marcus was led to the booking area. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, harsh and unforgiving after the morning sunshine. Wolf's camera recorded him removing the handcuffs, Marcus's wrists showing red marks where the metal had pressed too tight. The booking officer was a woman in her 40s named Patricia Delgado. She had processed hundreds of arrests over her 15-year career: drug dealers, drunk drivers, domestic abusers. She had seen everything. But when she ran Marcus Smith's information through the system, her fingers stopped moving. "No criminal record," she said slowly, reading the screen. "Not even a traffic ticket." She kept scrolling. Her expression shifted. "Military service verified. Active duty. United States Navy. Senior Chief Petty Officer." She looked up at Wolf, then at Marcus, then back at the screen. "Bronze Star. Purple Heart. Current assignment. Naval Special Warfare Training Command." The booking area went quiet. Delgado's voice dropped. "Homeowner at 4127 Ridgewood Drive. 3 years at that address. Property tax records confirmed." She turned to face Wolf directly, her camera angle capturing his profile, the color draining from his face, the realization beginning to dawn. "Derek," she said carefully, "what exactly did this man do?" Wolf's camera recorded his own hesitation, his mouth opening and closing without sound. 20 minutes later, Sergeant William Patterson arrived to review the body camera footage. He commandeered a small office, pulled up Wolf's recording on a monitor, and watched in silence. Reeves's footage played next, providing the second angle. The station's security cameras, mounted in the hallway outside, captured Patterson, emerging after 45 minutes. His face was ashen. He found Wolf in the break room. The hallway camera recorded their conversation through the glass window, no audio, but the body language spoke volumes. Patterson leaning in close, his finger jabbing toward Wolf's chest. Wolf stepping back, hands raised defensively, shaking his head. Patterson's final gesture, a sharp point toward the exit, unmistakable in its meaning. The security footage captured Patterson's words through the glass, lip-readable by experts who would later analyze the tape. "This is a problem, a big goddamn problem." Marcus Smith sat in a holding cell for 4 hours. No charges were filed, no paperwork was processed. At 2:23 p.m., Sergeant Patterson personally escorted him to the front desk, where Denise waited with red-rimmed eyes and a civil rights attorney already on speakerphone. "You're free to go," Patterson said quietly, unable to meet Marcus's eyes. We're sorry for the inconvenience." Inconvenience. The word hung in the air like an insult. Marcus said nothing. He took his wife's hand, walked through the front doors into the afternoon sunlight, and began planning his response. Marcus Smith made his first call from the parking lot of the Riverside Police Department. His commanding officer, Captain David Jones, answered on the second ring. "Sir, I need to report an incident," Marcus said, his voice flat, controlled. "I was just arrested at my home, held for 4 hours, no charges. I have reason to believe it was racial profiling." Captain Jones listened in silence as Marcus recounted the morning's events. When Marcus finished, Jones's response was immediate. "I'm contacting JAG," he said, "today. This doesn't stand." The Navy's Judge Advocate General's Corps opened an inquiry within 48 hours. Military attorneys reviewed the circumstances, documented Marcus's account, and reached a conclusion that surprised no one who had seen the footage. A decorated senior enlisted member had been subjected to unlawful arrest while engaged in official preparation for duty. The Navy took care of its own. But Marcus wanted more than military intervention. He wanted accountability. The JAG attorneys connected him with Patricia Okonkwo, a civilian civil rights lawyer whose reputation preceded her. Okonkwo had spent 18 years litigating police misconduct cases across California. She had won settlements totaling over $12 million. She had brought down officers, exposed departments, and forced reforms that changed how entire cities approached policing. When she heard Marcus's story, she cleared her calendar. "First thing we need is the footage," she told Marcus during their initial meeting, her office walls lined with framed newspaper articles about her victories. "Their own cameras will tell us everything." Okonkwo filed a Freedom of Information Act request the following morning. She demanded all body camera recordings from the incident, all dispatch records related to the anonymous 911 call, and the complete complaint history for Officer Derek Wolf. The city stalled. Okonkwo pushed. Deadlines were cited, Legal pressure applied. 3 weeks later, a hard drive arrived at her office containing 47 gigabytes of video files and a spreadsheet of internal affairs records that the department had clearly hoped would never see daylight. What she found was damning beyond expectation. Officer Derek Wolfe had conducted 47 documented stops of black individuals in Riverside's affluent neighborhoods over the past 3 years. 47 separate incidents where he had approached, detained, and questioned black men and women based on nothing more than their presence in spaces he deemed inappropriate. Not a single stop had resulted in a legitimate arrest. Not one had uncovered actual criminal activity. 47 innocent people, doctors, lawyers, contractors, visitors, residents, humiliated and traumatized because of the color of their skin. Okonkwo spread the records across her conference table. The pattern undeniable. They knew, she said quietly. They had to know, and they did nothing. The federal civil rights lawsuit was filed 8 weeks after Marcus Smith's arrest. Smith v. City of Riverside, Officer Derek Wolfe. The complaint landed like a thunderclap, its allegations methodical and devastating. Fourth Amendment violation, unlawful seizure without probable cause or reasonable suspicion. False arrest, detention and handcuffing without legal justification. Racial profiling, discriminatory enforcement based solely on race. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. Conduct so outrageous that no civilized society should tolerate it. The complaint named Wolfe, individually, and the City of Riverside for its failure to train, supervise, and discipline an officer with a documented pattern of discriminatory conduct. The depositions began 4 months later. Patricia Okonkwo had spent decades perfecting the art of letting officers destroy themselves with their own words, their own footage, their own inability to justify the unjustifiable. Wolfe's body camera footage was played on a large monitor in the conference room. His own lens had captured everything in the bright morning sunlight. Marcus's military ID held out for inspection, the Department of Defense seal clearly visible, the words United States Navy legible even on the small screen. Agent Wolfe, Okonkwo said, pausing the video at the 2-second mark where Wolfe glanced at and dismissed the ID. You testified that you couldn't verify this identification, but your own camera shows you looking directly at it. Can you read what it says? Wolfe shifted in his seat. I saw it. And what did it say? Silence. It identified Mr. Smith as a senior chief petty officer in the United States Navy, didn't it? I thought it might be fake. Based on what evidence? More silence. His attorney leaned in to whisper something. Wolfe shook his head. I've seen fake IDs before. Have you ever seen a fake Department of Defense military identification card? No answer. Officer Reeves's footage was played next, the wider angle showing Marcus's house directly behind him, the military stickers on his vehicle, the complete absence of any criminal activity. Her camera had also captured something else. Her own quiet suggestion to Wolfe. Did you verify the address? Her recorded voice asked. I don't need to verify anything, Wolfe's voice responded. I know what I'm looking at. Okonkwo let the words hang in the room. Then came the pattern evidence. 47 stops displayed on a timeline, each one documented with dates, locations, and outcomes. A. Exposed. Black individuals in nice neighborhoods, stopped without cause, released without charges, their dignity stripped away by an officer who faced no consequences. The city's attorneys watched the evidence accumulate like a verdict already written. They had seen enough lawsuits to know when a case was unwinnable. This one had been lost the moment Wolfe activated his body camera. The City of Riverside's legal team knew they were facing a disaster. They had seen the body camera footage. They had reviewed the pattern evidence. They had watched Patricia Okonkwo dismantle Officer Wolfe's justifications in depositions, leaving nothing but stammered non-answers and damning silence. And they had imagined with growing dread what a jury would see when that footage played on courtroom monitors. 12 ordinary citizens watching a decorated Navy SEAL, a Bronze Star recipient, a man who had bled for his country, being handcuffed in his own driveway, his military ID dismissed, his driver's license ignored, his dignity stripped away while neighbors watched in horror and his wife sobbed in the street. No jury in America would side with the city. The only question was how much the verdict would cost. Settlement negotiations began 6 months after the lawsuit was filed. The city's initial offer was insulting $150,000, barely enough to cover attorney fees. Okonkwo rejected it without counteroffering. They came back with $300,000, rejected, $500,000, rejected. They're not understanding what they're facing, Okonkwo told Marcus during a strategy session. A jury won't just compensate you. They'll punish the city. They'll send a message. We could be looking at 7 figures, plus punitive damages. The city's attorneys understood eventually. Their final offer arrived on a Thursday afternoon, $875,000, plus comprehensive departmental reforms. No admission of liability, they never admit liability, but the settlement terms told their own story. Marcus accepted. The money mattered less than what came with it. Officer Derek Wolf was terminated within 72 hours of the settlement announcement. 9 years on the force, 11 ignored complaints, 47 discriminatory stops, all of it ending not with accountability from within, but with external pressure the department could no longer resist. He would never wear a badge again. Officer Tanya Reeves received a formal reprimand and was transferred to records management, a desk assignment far from the streets where her silence had enabled Wolf's abuse. She lasted 3 months before submitting her resignation. In her exit interview, captured in departmental records that would later become public, she admitted the truth she had avoided. That Saturday morning, "I knew it was wrong," she said. "I knew he was targeting that man because he was black, and I didn't say anything. I can't live with that. I can't wear this uniform knowing what I let happen." The mandatory reforms were extensive. New protocols requiring residency verification before any arrest at a private residence, enhanced bias training with quarterly assessments and accountability metrics, an independent civilian oversight board with full subpoena power to investigate complaints, the teeth that Internal Affairs had always lacked. The Riverside Police Department would never operate the same way again. The cost of protecting Derek Wolf had finally come due. Marcus Smith could have taken his settlement and disappeared. He could have returned to his life, his family, his career, his quiet street in Ridgewood Estates, and let the system move on without him. Many victims did exactly that, exhausted by the process, eager to forget. But Marcus had spent 16 years running toward danger, not away from it. He wasn't about to stop now. 3 weeks after the settlement was announced, he appeared before the Riverside City Council. The chamber was packed journalists, activists, community members, and fellow veterans who had heard about his case and traveled from across the state to show support. Television cameras lined the back wall. Marcus wore his dress uniform, every ribbon and medal displayed on his chest. The trident gleamed under the fluorescent lights. He stood at the podium and spoke without notes, his voice carrying the same steady authority that had led men through combat. "I have served this country for 16 years, he began. "I have been shot at by enemies overseas. I have lost friends in combat. I have sacrificed time with my family, missed my children's birthdays, spent holidays in places I can't name, doing things I can't discuss. I did all of this willingly, proudly, because I believed in what this country stands for." He paused, letting the silence settle. "And then I was handcuffed in my own driveway because a police officer saw a black man in a nice neighborhood and decided I didn't belong. My military ID meant nothing. My service meant nothing. My home, my family, my sacrifices, none of it mattered. To Officer Wolf, I was just another suspicious black male." The council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "This isn't just about me," Marcus continued. "It's about every black veteran who comes home from serving their country only to be treated like a criminal in their own community. It's about every black professional who gets stopped for driving a nice car or walking in the wrong neighborhood. It's about a system that protects officers like Derek Wolf until outside pressure forces accountability." He announced the creation of the Warriors for Justice Foundation that same night. Funded by a significant portion of his settlement, the organization would provide free legal resources to veterans facing discrimination, connecting them with attorneys, documenting patterns of abuse, ensuring that those who served their country could fight back when their country failed them. Marcus returned to his duties at the Naval Special Warfare Training Command, but his role had expanded. He now led a new module on civil rights and community relations, teaching the next generation of SEALs not just how to operate in hostile territory abroad, but how to navigate a society that too often treated them as threats at home. "You will face enemies overseas," he told each new class, his voice firm. "But some of you will face different enemies here. Know your rights. Document everything. And never let anyone convince you that your service doesn't matter." The body camera footage from that Saturday morning became required viewing at the Riverside Police Academy. Every new recruit watched Wolf's dismissal of Marcus's credentials, watched Reeves's silence, watched a decorated hero treated like a suspect. The lesson was explicit. Assumptions destroy careers, bias costs taxpayers, and body cameras capture everything. Marcus Smith had fought for his country across 3 continents. In the end, his most important battle was won in his own driveway, and its impact would be felt for generations. Senior Chief Petty Officer Marcus Smith gave 16 years of his life to the United States of America, 3 combat deployments to the most dangerous places on Earth, a Bronze Star for exceptional valor under fire, a Purple Heart for wounds, sustained defending the freedoms that every American holds dear. He led men into battle and brought them home alive. He missed birthdays, anniversaries, and holidays so that others could celebrate theirs in peace. He sacrificed in ways that most citizens will never understand and asked for nothing in return but the chance to live quietly with his family in the country he had served. His reward for that service? Handcuffed in his own driveway on a Saturday morning because Officer Derek Wolf saw a black man in a nice neighborhood and decided he didn't belong. His military ID was dismissed as fake. His driver's license was ignored. His credentials, his combat decorations, his 16 years of sacrifice, all of it rendered meaningless by an officer who had already made up his mind the moment he turned onto Ridgewood Drive. But Officer Wolf made one critical mistake. He activated his body camera. Every dismissive word was recorded. Every aggressive gesture was captured. Every moment of Marcus Smith's calm compliance and Wolf's baseless escalation was preserved in high-definition video with crystal-clear audio. The very device meant to protect officers from false accusations became the evidence that exposed the truth. That truth cost the city of Riverside $875,000. It cost Derek Wolf his career, his badge, and his reputation. It forced a police department to implement reforms it had resisted for years. And it gave Marcus Smith a platform to fight for every veteran who has ever come home from war only to be treated like a criminal in their own community. The body camera footage didn't lie. It never does. This case was disturbing, but the one on the right ends in a way no one expects.
Daycare, you're terrifying them.
You were told to move. Hands up and turn
I
around.
haven't done anything wrong. This isn't necessary.
Do it now or you will be detained.
The morning sun streamed through the finger-painted windows of Sunshine Kids Learning Center, casting rainbow shadows across the tiny chairs and alphabet rugs. Tuesday, 9:47 a.m., the kind of Texas spring morning that promised warmth without the brutal summer heat, where the air still carried the sweetness of blooming jasmine from the garden outside. In the butterfly room, 12 toddlers sat in a wobbly circle, singing about wheels on buses while their teacher clapped along. Down the hall, infants napped in cribs beneath mobiles of smiling clouds. The smell of graham crackers and apple juice drifted from the snack station. Sunshine Kids occupied a cheerful, single-story building in Cedar Mills, a diverse suburban neighborhood 20 minutes outside Dallas. The center had served the community for 15 years, its waiting list perpetually full, its reputation built on warmth and genuine care. Bright murals covered every wall, giraffes stretching toward painted clouds, dolphins leaping through cotton candy waves, a rainbow arching over children of every shade holding hands. Parents lingered at drop-off, chatting with staff they'd known for years. This was the kind of place where teachers remembered every child's favorite snack, every parent's work schedule, every family's story. Security cameras watched it all. 8 of them positioned throughout the facility, capturing every corner, every entrance, every moment of the day. The system recorded continuously in high definition, storing footage for 60 days before overwriting. Standard procedure for any licensed childcare facility: protection against liability, documentation for concerned parents, evidence in case of accidents or disputes. What those cameras captured over the next 43 minutes would become the cornerstone of a federal lawsuit that would make national headlines. Would show the moment 3 men in tactical vests pushed through the front door without signing in. Would document the terror that unfolded in the butterfly room. Would preserve in unflinching detail 12 toddlers screaming for a teacher being dragged away in handcuffs. But at 9:47 a.m., none of that had happened yet. At 9:47 a.m., Sunshine Kids Learning Center was just a daycare on a Tuesday morning, full of finger paint and graham crackers, and children who believed the adults in their lives would always keep them safe. Monique Lawson had Texas running through her veins 3 generations deep. Her grandmother, Beulah Mae Lawson, had picked cotton in East Texas until her fingers bled, had marched for voting rights in Houston, had lived to see her granddaughter earn a college degree, and wept at the graduation ceremony. Her mother, Evelyn, had taught 3rd grade at the same elementary school for 31 years, shaping hundreds of young minds with patience and chalk dust and an unwavering belief that every child could learn. Monique had grown up surrounded by that legacy. Houston-born, Houston-raised. She'd played in the same parks her mother had played in, attended the same church her grandmother had helped build. She'd graduated from Westbury High School with honors, then earned her early childhood education degree from Prairie View A&M University, the same historically black university her grandfather had dreamed of attending but never could. She was 34 years old. She'd worked at Sunshine Kids Learning Center for 8 years, starting as an assistant teacher making $11 an hour, working her way up through dedication and genuine love for the work. Now she was lead toddler room teacher, responsible for the butterfly room and its 12 tiny humans. She had certifications in infant CPR, child development, early intervention techniques. She had a file full of glowing performance reviews and a wall of thank you cards from parents. The children adored her. They called her Miss Mo, reached for her when they were scared, showed her their drawings before anyone else. Parents requested her by name, some staying on the waiting list for months, specifically to get their child into her room. She knew every kid's quirks who needed extra time with transitions, who had allergies, who was struggling at home and needed gentler handling. Monique Lawson was, by every measure, an ordinary American living an ordinary life. She paid taxes. She voted in every election. She had an apartment in Cedar Mills, a car payment, a savings account for the house she hoped to buy someday. Her birth certificate sat in a fireproof safe at her mother's house in Houston, alongside her Social Security card, her passport, and 3 generations of family documents proving what should never have needed proving. She was the heartbeat of Sunshine Kids, and in 11 minutes, federal agents would stop that heart cold. Monique's Tuesday began like every other workday for the past 8 years. She pulled into the Sunshine Kids parking lot at 7:15 a.m., coffee in hand, her bag stuffed with laminated flashcards she'd made the night before. The morning was still cool, dew clinging to the grass around the playground equipment. She unlocked the side entrance with her staff key, disabled the alarm, and headed straight for the butterfly room. Preparation was everything with toddlers. She wiped down the tiny tables with disinfectant, arranged the chairs in a circle for morning meeting, set out the bins of crayons and blocks. She prepped the snack station, animal crackers and apple slices, small cups ready for juice. She queued up the morning songs on the classroom tablet, tested the volume, made sure the backup batteries were charged. By 7:45, the first parents started arriving. Drop-offs were always a mix of tearful goodbyes and eager runners. Monique greeted each child by name, complimented new shoes and fresh haircuts, assured anxious parents that yes, everything would be fine. Yes, she'd make sure Maya got her blanket at nap time. By 9:30, all 12 of her toddlers had arrived. The butterfly room hummed with controlled chaos, the natural state of any space containing a dozen 2-year-olds. They'd made it through circle time, stumbling through the days of the week song, arguing over who got to hold the weather bear. They'd survived a minor crisis when two boys wanted the same fire truck. Now they were in free play, the noise level hovering somewhere between cheerful and deafening. Monique knelt beside Sophia Reyes, a tiny girl with pigtails and a gap-toothed smile, helping her with Velcro shoes that refused to cooperate. Sophia was chattering about her cat, something about whiskers and breakfast, the words tumbling out faster than her tongue could manage. "Almost got it, baby girl," Monique said, pressing the strap into place. "There, good as new." The front door buzzer sounded. Nothing unusual late drop-offs happened. Delivery drivers came by. Parents forgot things. Through the butterfly room's interior window, Monique could see Denise at the reception desk, rising to answer. Three men in tactical vests pushed through before Denise could reach the door. The letters on their chests were visible even from 40 feet away. ICE. Monique's hands froze on Sophia's shoe. They moved like men accustomed to resistance. Tactical formation, hands near belts, eyes scanning the space with practiced efficiency. 3 federal agents in a room designed for finger painting and nap time, their boots heavy on floors meant for tiny socked feet. Lead agent Victor Stanton was already talking before Monique could stand. "Immigration and Customs Enforcement. We need to speak with employees regarding work authorization." His voice carried across the butterfly room, flat and loud, cutting through the chatter of 12 toddlers who didn't yet understand what was happening. But they felt it. Children always feel it. The room went quiet in patches, some kids freezing mid-play, others looking up with wide eyes, a few continuing to babble, oblivious. Monique rose slowly, positioning herself between the agents and her children. She kept her voice calm, her movements deliberate. 15 years from now, body camera footage would show how steady she remained in this moment, how her hands didn't shake even as her heart hammered against her ribs. "You're in a classroom full of 2-year-olds, she said, her voice low but firm. "Whatever you need, we can discuss it outside." Stanton didn't move. "Ma'am, I need to see identification and proof of legal work status, now. I'm a U.S. citizen, born in Houston, Texas. I've worked here for 8 years. Monique kept her body angled toward the children, a human shield in a cardigan and sensible flats. "My documents are in my locker in the staff room. I'm asking you, please, step into the hallway. These are babies." Behind her, Sophia had started whimpering, her small hand reaching for Monique's leg. Another child, a boy named Deshaun, stood frozen by the block station, his lower lip trembling. The energy in the room was shifting, confusion, curdling into fear, the way it does when children sense adults are scared. Agent Stanton's partners had spread out. One blocked the interior door, the other moved along the wall, his eyes cataloging faces, taking mental notes Monique couldn't read. "Ma'am, you need to come with us to verify your status. Step away from the children. I'm not leaving this room until someone qualified takes over care of these kids." Monique's voice didn't waver. "Call my director. Call corporate. I'm not abandoning 12 toddlers with strangers." Stanton's jaw tightened. Behind Monique, Sophia began to cry. The agents didn't move toward the hallway. They spread wider instead. Agent Kowalski positioned himself at the interior door, his broad frame blocking the only exit to the rest of the building. Agent Brennan pulled out his phone and began photographing the room, the murals, the cubbies with children's names, the tiny faces staring up at him with growing confusion. The flash blinked again and again, clinical and cold. "Ma'am, I'm not going to ask again." Stanton's voice had hardened, patience evaporating like morning dew. "Produce documentation now or you'll be detained for failure to comply." "My purse is in my locker." Monique kept her voice steady, though her pulse was screaming. "Staff room, down the hall. My driver's license, my employee ID, everything is there." "Let me get it, or let me call Lorraine Okafor, our director. She has all my employment records, I-9 forms, background checks, everything went through proper channels when I was hired. We'll verify through our own channels. Step away from the children." "I'm not leaving them alone with..." "They won't be alone. Your coworkers can handle it." Stanton gestured vaguely toward the door, toward staff members who weren't there, toward a handoff that hadn't been arranged. "Move, now." Sophia's crying had grown louder, her small body pressed against Monique's leg, arms wrapped tight around her knee. The sound triggered a chain reaction. Toddlers are tuned to each other's distress like instruments in an orchestra of fear. One by one, the whimpering spread. A boy named Marcus started hiccuping, tears streaming down his round cheeks. A girl clutching a stuffed rabbit began wailing for her mama. Deshaun hadn't moved from the block station. He stood frozen, tears sliding silently down his face, watching the men in black vests with the kind of stillness that breaks hearts. Brennan's camera kept flashing. Kowalski stood like a statue at the door. The security camera in the corner recorded everything, the growing terror in 12 small faces, the agent photographing babies like evidence, the woman in the cardigan trying to hold the world together with nothing but her body and her voice. Please. Monique heard the crack in her own voice, hated it. Please. They're 2 years old. Whatever you think I've done, they haven't done anything. Step outside. 60 seconds. That's all I'm asking. Stanton reached for her arm. His grip was iron. Stanton's hand closed around Monique's wrist and yanked, pulling her away from the children with a force that nearly took her off her feet. She stumbled, caught herself, and then the cold metal was circling her wrists, the ratcheting click of handcuffs echoing through a room full of alphabet posters and crayon drawings. The butterfly room exploded. 12 voices erupted at once, screaming, sobbing, shrieking in a chorus of pure terror. "Miss Mo! Miss Mo!" The words tore from tiny throats, raw and desperate. Sophia collapsed onto the floor, her whole body shaking with sobs so violent she couldn't breathe. Marcus ran in circles, wailing. A little girl named Destiny started hyperventilating, her face going red, then purple. Deshaun broke free from his frozen state and sprinted toward Monique, his small arms outstretched, reaching for the only safety he knew. Agent Brennan stepped into his path, a wall of tactical vest and federal authority blocking a 2-year-old boy from his teacher. Deshaun bounced off the agent's legs and fell backward, landing hard on his bottom, his wail joining the others. "Stop! Stop this right now!" Lorraine Okafor burst through the door. Kowalski had been blocking, shoving past him with the force of a woman who'd spent 30 years protecting children. Her reading glasses hung crooked on her face, her cardigan buttoned wrong, clearly interrupted mid-task. "What are you doing? This is a licensed childcare facility. You can't—" "Ma'am, stand back or you'll be charged with obstruction." Kowalski's voice was bored, rehearsed. "Federal investigation." "Federal investigation of what? She's been with me for 8 years. I have all her documents." They weren't listening. They were already moving. Stanton and Brennan flanking Monique, guiding her through the chaos of screaming children toward the front of the building. Past the infant room where babies startled awake. Past Denise at reception, her hand pressed to her mouth in horror. Past the cheerful welcome sign and the parent bulletin board. Past the front windows where 3 parents arriving for early pickup watched a black woman in handcuffs being escorted out of their children's daycare. The phones came out immediately. The footage would be online within the hour. The screaming didn't stop for hours. Lorraine Okafor moved through the butterfly room like a medic in a war zone, gathering children into her arms, calling for backup staff, trying to contain a catastrophe that had already detonated. But there was no containing it. Sophia had to be physically peeled off the floor where she'd collapsed, her small body rigid with terror, her voice gone hoarse from shrieking. Deshaun had retreated under a table and refused to come out, flinching every time an adult approached. Marcus vomited from crying so hard. 3 children couldn't catch their breath. Destiny's hyperventilation worsened until her lips turned blue. A boy named Jalen started gasping, his tiny chest heaving. A girl named Amara passed out cold on the reading rug. Lorraine called 911. While her assistant director loaded all 3 into her personal car, the ambulance would take too long. She decided in a split-second calculation that would later be scrutinized in depositions. All 3 children were treated for acute stress response at Cedar Mills Urgent Care. All 3 were under the age of 3. By 10:30 a.m., every parent on the Sunshine Kids contact list had received an emergency call. "There's been an incident. We need you to pick up your child immediately. We'll explain when you arrive." The parking lot filled with panicked mothers and fathers, some still in work clothes, others in pajamas, all of them demanding answers that Lorraine didn't fully have. She told them what she knew. Federal agents. Monique detained. No charges explained. The children witnessed everything. Parents wept. Parents screamed. Parents held their traumatized toddlers and rocked them in the parking lot, afraid to take them inside, afraid to leave, afraid of a world where this could happen in a place designed to be safe. By 11 a.m., Lorraine had called corporate headquarters and secured a directive to preserve all security footage. By 11:15, she'd contacted a lawyer, a former parent, whose child had graduated to kindergarten 2 years prior, but who still sent holiday cards. By 11:30, the first parent video had been posted to Facebook. By noon, local news vans were parked outside Sunshine Kids Learning Center, their cameras pointed at the cheerful rainbow mural like an accusation. The footage spread, the story caught fire, and somewhere in a federal holding facility, Monique Lawson had no idea the world was starting to watch. The cell was cold. That was what Monique would remember most clearly in the months that followed the relentless, bone-deep cold of concrete and metal and recycled air that seemed designed to remind you that comfort was a privilege you'd lost. They processed her in silence, photographed her, fingerprinted her, took her watch, her earrings, the hair tie from her wrist. Asked questions she answered over and over: name, date of birth, place of birth, citizenship status, until the words lost meaning, until Houston, Texas felt like a prayer she was begging them to believe. She asked for a phone call, request denied. She asked again at hour 2, hour 3, hour 4, denied, denied, denied. The agents cycled through shifts, new faces replacing old ones, none of them meeting her eyes, all of them treating her like a problem to be processed rather than a person to be helped. At hour 6, they finally let her call. Evelyn Lawson answered on the first ring. Baby, baby, where are you? It's all over the news. Mama, Monique's voice cracked for the first time since the handcuffs clicked. I need you to bring my documents. Birth certificate, social security card, passport. They're in the safe. I'm already in the car. Of course she was. Evelyn Lawson hadn't raised a fool, and she hadn't raised a victim. I'm coming, baby. I'm coming. The drive from Houston took 4 hours. Evelyn arrived at the facility by 8 p.m., documents in hand, fire in her eyes. She presented everything: original birth certificate from Houston Methodist Hospital, social security card issued 34 years ago, passport renewed last spring for a cruise that never happened. The verification should have taken minutes. It took 28 more hours. No explanation, no updates, no apologies. Monique sat in that cold cell while bureaucracy ground its slow gears, while paperwork sat on desks unexamined, while her mother waited in a plastic chair in a fluorescent lobby and refused to leave. Monique survived by reaching backward, by closing her eyes and hearing her grandmother's voice, rough with age and sweet with faith, singing the hymns that had carried Beulah May Lawson through cotton fields and courtrooms, and a life spent being told she didn't belong. Precious Lord, take my hand, Monique whispered to the concrete walls. Lead me on, let me stand. 42 hours after agents dragged her from a room full of screaming toddlers, Monique Lawson walked out of federal detention. Her mother caught her before she collapsed. Nadine Beaumont had spent 23 years making federal agencies regret their worst decisions. Her office in downtown Dallas was modest: no mahogany, no leather chairs, no intimidation tactics dressed up as decor. Just file cabinets stuffed with case histories, a wall of framed verdicts, and a reputation that preceded her into every courtroom. Immigration enforcement cases were her specialty. She'd seen it all: workplace raids, traffic stop detentions, families torn apart on suspicion and assumption. But when Monique Lawson walked into her office 2 weeks after her release, Nadine knew immediately this case was different. They did it in front of the children, Monique said, her voice steady but her hands trembling around a cup of water she hadn't touched. 12 toddlers watched them drag me out in handcuffs. 3 of them ended up in urgent care. Nadine leaned forward. Tell me everything. The evidence was overwhelming. Security footage from Sunshine Kids captured every angle: the agents pushing through the front door, the confrontation in the butterfly room, the handcuffing, the screaming children, the chaos left behind. 8 cameras, 43 minutes of uninterrupted documentation. Body camera footage, obtained through FOIA requests after months of bureaucratic stonewalling, confirmed what the daycare cameras showed and added audio that made jurors flinch during depositions. 9 parents provided witness statements. 3 had been in the parking lot during the arrest, their phone videos already viral. 6 others documented their children's trauma in painful detail, the nightmares, the bedwetting, the terror at seeing anyone in uniform. Lorraine Okafor and 4 staff members gave testimony about the agents' refusal to follow any reasonable protocol, their dismissal of offers to verify employment, their treatment of a licensed childcare facility like a smuggling operation. Medical records told the rest. 3 children treated for acute stress response, 2 prescribed child-appropriate anxiety medication. 1 little girl, Sophia Reyes, had stopped speaking entirely for 11 days after the incident. The lawsuit filed in federal court alleged unlawful seizure, Fourth Amendment violations, racial profiling, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and negligent infliction of emotional distress on minor children. 27 pages of constitutional violations committed against a woman whose only crime was being black in a daycare center in Texas. They made assumptions, Nadine told reporters outside the courthouse, and those assumptions traumatized a woman, devastated a community, and terrorized 12 innocent children. We intend to hold them accountable. Discovery broke the case wide open. Federal attorneys fought every request, filed motion after motion to seal documents, claimed national security concerns that collapsed under judicial scrutiny. Judge Patricia Thornton, a no-nonsense appointee with zero patience for obstruction, denied each attempt with increasingly pointed language. The government does not get to hide misconduct behind classification stamps, she wrote in one ruling. Transparency is not optional. What emerged from the unsealed documents was damning. Internal ICE communications showed that Stanton, Kowalski, and Brennan had been conducting a neighborhood sweep that morning, not based on specific intelligence, not responding to credible tips, but targeting Cedar Mills because demographic data suggested high probability of undocumented workers. No individual names, no specific locations, just assumptions drawn from census information about a diverse suburban community. Agent Stanton's text messages were worse. 3 days before the Sunshine Kids raid, he'd messaged a colleague, heading to Cedar Mills tomorrow, easy targets. Should hit quota before lunch. Another text, sent the night before, daycares and restaurants, low resistance, quick processing. The casual cruelty of it sat in the courtroom like a stench no one could ignore. Depositions revealed contradictions, stacked on contradictions. Stanton claimed he'd received a tip about undocumented workers at Sunshine Kids. When pressed for documentation, none existed. Kowalski said they'd followed standard protocol. When confronted with the actual protocols, which required supervisor approval before entering childcare facilities, he went silent. Brennan couldn't explain why he'd photographed the children, couldn't justify blocking a 2-year-old boy from reaching his teacher, couldn't meet anyone's eyes when the security footage played on the courtroom screen. Expert witnesses drove the final nails. Child psychologists testified about the long-term damage of witnessing caregiver detention, disrupted attachment, chronic anxiety, developmental regression. Dr. Eleanor Vance, a specialist in early childhood trauma, presented research showing that experiences like what the butterfly room children endured could alter brain development, could echo through decades of life. These children learned that the adults who protect them can be taken away without warning. Dr. Vance said, her voice quiet but devastating. That is not a lesson any 2-year-old should learn. The defense had nothing left. The evidence had already spoken. The trial lasted 3 weeks. It felt like 3 years. Federal Courtroom 4B in Dallas became a theater of accountability. Every seat filled, overflow crowds watching via closed-circuit feed in adjacent rooms. Media from across the country had descended. This wasn't just a local story anymore. This was a referendum on enforcement, on assumptions, on what happens when power meets prejudice in a room full of toddlers. Monique took the stand on day 4. She wore a simple navy dress, her hair pulled back, her grandmother's cross around her neck. Nadine guided her through the story gently. Methodically, her Houston childhood, her family's legacy, her education, her career. The jury heard about Beulah May picking cotton with bleeding fingers, about Evelyn teaching third grade for 31 years, about 3 generations of Texas women who'd built lives through work and faith and stubborn refusal to be erased. "Why do you work with toddlers?" Nadine asked. Monique's voice caught. "Because they're just starting to learn who they are. They're learning whether the world is safe, whether people can be trusted. I wanted to be someone who taught them yes. The world is safe. People can be trusted." She paused, wiping her eyes. Those agents taught them the opposite. In 43 minutes, they undid everything I'd spent years building. Parents testified next. One after another, they described children who'd been bright and curious before that Tuesday morning and were now shadows of themselves. Nightmares that persisted months later. Fear of strangers so intense that doctors' visits required sedation. Regression, children who'd been potty trained suddenly wetting themselves again. Children who'd been speaking in sentences retreating to single words. Sophia Reyes's mother sobbed on the stand. "She didn't talk for 11 days. My baby girl, who never stopped chattering, went silent. And when she finally spoke again, the first thing she said was, 'Where's Miss Mo? Did the bad men take her away forever?'" Child psychologists presented clinical evidence. Lorraine Okafor testified about the devastation to Sunshine Kids, 4 staff members who quit immediately, 2 traumatized to return, 12 families who withdrew their children, a waiting list that evaporated overnight. A business built on trust, shattered by 3 men who couldn't be bothered to verify a birth certificate. On day 12, the security footage played. The courtroom fell silent as the jury watched. 8 camera angles synchronized, showing every moment. The agents pushing through, the confrontation, the handcuffs clicking shut, and then the screaming. 12 tiny voices shrieking in terror, the sound quality crystal clear, impossible to ignore or minimize or explain away. Sophia collapsing, Deshawn being blocked by Agent Brennan. Children running in circles, crying for Miss Mo, their world ending in real time. Several jurors wiped their eyes. One asked for a recess. Agent Stanton, sitting at the defense table, stared at his hands and didn't look up for the rest of the day. 7 hours. That's how long the jury deliberated before requesting to return to the courtroom. Monique sat between her mother and Nadine, her hands folded in her lap, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Evelyn gripped her daughter's arm, her lips moving in silent prayer. Behind them, the gallery was packed. Parents from Sunshine Kids, advocates, reporters, strangers who'd followed the case and needed to see how it ended. Judge Thornton called the court to order. The foreperson, a middle-aged black woman in a burgundy blazer, stood with the verdict form trembling slightly in her hands. On the claim of unlawful seizure in violation of the Fourth Amendment, how does the jury find? We find the defendants liable. On the claim of racial discrimination in enforcement, we find the defendants liable. On the claim of intentional infliction of emotional distress, liable. On the claim of negligent infliction of emotional distress upon minor children, liable. Unanimous. Every count. The word liable echoed through the courtroom like a bell tolling justice. Judge Thornton turned to the damages phase. The foreperson continued reading, her voice growing stronger with each figure. Compensatory damages for Monique Lawson's unlawful detention, psychological trauma, lost wages, and ongoing treatment, $2,400,000. Evelyn's grip tightened on Monique's arm. Additional compensatory damages to be allocated to a therapeutic fund for the affected children of Sunshine Kids Learning Center, $1,200,000. Somewhere in the gallery, a parent let out a choked sob. Punitive damages against the defendants, intended to punish the egregious conduct and deter future violations of civil rights, $4,800,000. The foreperson looked up from the paper, her eyes finding Monique's across the courtroom. Total award, $8,400,000. The courtroom erupted. Applause, cheers, weeping a release of tension that had been building for months. Advocates embraced. Parents clutched each other. Reporters scrambled for their phones. Monique didn't move. She sat perfectly still as her mother collapsed against her shoulder, weeping with a grief and relief too tangled to separate. Nadine squeezed her hand once, firm and brief, professional to the end. At the defense table, Agent Victor Stanton stared at the floor. His face was gray, emptied of the arrogance that had carried him into a daycare full of toddlers 8 months ago. Kowalski sat rigid, jaw clenched. Brennan had his head in his hands. Monique finally allowed herself to breathe. It wasn't about the money. It had never been about the money. It was about the record, permanent, public, undeniable that what they'd done was wrong. That 12 children's screams had been heard. That her grandmother's granddaughter had stood in a federal courtroom and refused to be erased. $8,400,000. The cost of assuming a black woman in a cardigan didn't belong in her own country. The consequences came swift and absolute. Agents Victor Stanton, Kowalski, and Brennan were terminated within 6 weeks of the verdict. Internal review boards that had dragged their feet for months suddenly found urgency, their reports echoing what the jury had already declared: gross misconduct, violation of protocols, conduct unbecoming of federal officers. Stanton appealed his termination. The appeal was denied. His text messages about easy targets and hitting quota had been read into the public record. No agency wanted that stain on their roster. Policy changes followed. The Department of Homeland Security issued new protocols requiring supervisor approval before any enforcement action at child care facilities, schools, hospitals, or medical centers. Written documentation of probable cause became mandatory before detention. Verification of citizenship claims was required within 12 hours, not 42. The reforms weren't perfect. Advocates pointed out loopholes, enforcement gaps, the distance between written policy and lived practice, but they were something. They were acknowledgement that what happened in the butterfly room should never happen again. Monique didn't touch the settlement money for 3 months. It sat in an account while she focused on healing therapy twice a week, long walks with her mother, quiet evenings relearning how to feel safe in her own skin. The nightmares faded slowly. The flinch at unexpected sounds took longer. When she was ready, she knew exactly what to do. The Beulah May Lawson Scholarship Fund launched on what would have been her grandmother's 93rd birthday. Full tuition for early childhood education students from underrepresented communities, black and brown women who wanted to do what Monique had done, who wanted to shape young minds and build safe spaces, who deserved support instead of suspicion. The first class of recipients included 12 scholars, one for each child who'd been in the butterfly room that Tuesday morning. 8 months after her detention, Monique returned to Sunshine Kids. She'd considered other paths. Other centers had offered positions, higher pay, fresh starts, places where no one would look at her and remember. But Sunshine Kids was home. The butterfly room was hers. Running away felt like letting them win. Her first morning back, she arrived at 7:15, just like always. Unlocked the side entrance, disabled the alarm, walked to the butterfly room and stood in the doorway, breathing through the tightness in her chest. The room looked the same. Tiny chairs, alphabet rug, finger-painted windows catching the morning light. At 8:30, the children started arriving. New faces mixed with familiar ones. Some families had returned when they heard Miss Moe was coming back. And then, clutching her mother's hand in the doorway, there was Sophia Reyes, 3 years old now, pigtails, gap-toothed smile, eyes that went wide when she saw Monique standing by the Circle Time rug. "Miss Moe!" Sophia broke free from her mother and ran full speed, arms outstretched, crashing into Monique's legs with the force of a small hurricane. Monique knelt down and gathered her close, feeling the tiny heartbeat against her chest, the small arms wrapped tight around her neck. "I missed you," Sophia whispered. "I missed you too, baby girl." Monique's voice broke. "I missed you too." She became an advocate after that. Conference speeches about protecting vulnerable spaces, testimony before state legislatures considering child care worker protections, interviews where she told her story again and again, not for sympathy, but for change. She spoke about the children who still flinched at loud noises, about the parents who still checked twice before leaving their kids anywhere, about the workers who deserved to do their jobs without fear of federal agents treating them like criminals. The trauma didn't disappear, but it transformed into something useful, something that mattered. 3 years later, Monique Lawson still walks through the doors of Sunshine Kids Learning Center every morning. Her title is different now: assistant director, responsible for staff training, parent relations, curriculum development. She still stops by the butterfly room every day, still knows every child's name, still keeps graham crackers in her desk for toddlers who need a little extra comfort. Some things don't change, some things shouldn't. The center installed a bronze plaque in the lobby last spring. It hangs beside the welcome sign, above the cubbies where parents store diaper bags and extra clothes. The words are simple: every child deserves to feel safe. Every worker deserves dignity. Now, watching footage like this, it can really stick with you, right? Some of these clips stay in your head, especially late at night when you're trying to fall asleep. And speaking of sleep, if you're someone who lies awake at 2 or 3 a.m., mind racing, unable to shut off, I know how frustrating that is. You're exhausted, but your brain just won't stop. And the worst part? The less you sleep, the worse it gets. Your energy crashes, your mood suffers, everything feels harder than it should. I struggled with this for years. Tried melatonin, white noise, warm milk, nothing worked long term. Then I found something called the 30-Day Uninterrupted Sleep Reset. It's a science-based program, no pills, no medication, that actually retrains your brain to sleep through the night, 7 to 8 hours, uninterrupted. It uses the same method sleep clinics charge thousands for. But instead of paying for expensive doctors, you get a clear, step-by-step plan you can follow from home. Over 30 days, it rewires your sleep system. And once you're done, you keep the results. There's a maintenance plan so you don't slip back. Look, if you've tried everything and nothing sticks, this is different. I'll leave a link in the description below.
Hey, you don't just walk in here and act like you belong!
What is this, officer?
I've seen your type come in, linger, and try to walk out with merchandise!
I didn't take anything!
Shut up! Don't make it worse! People like you don't get special treatment in my store!
At 2:17 p.m., inside Fontaine's boutique, an upscale prom and formal wear shop in the heart of Glenfield's whitest shopping district, a black woman in jeans and a Howard University sweatshirt was slammed against a display case and handcuffed in front of her 7-year-old daughter. The girl was still wearing a $1,200 gown she had been trying on moments earlier. She was crying. Her mother was not. The man who put the cuffs on was Officer Rick Tully, an off-duty cop moonlighting as private security, badge clipped to his belt, hand already on his weapon before he even spoke a word. He told her she matched the description of a shoplifter. She didn't. He told her she was being detained for trespassing. She wasn't. He told her to stop resisting. She hadn't moved. What Rick Tully did not know, what he hadn't bothered to find out before putting his hands on a woman browsing dresses with her child, was that the person he just forced to the ground was federal judge Nadine Calloway of the United States Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, one of the highest-ranking judicial officers in the country, a woman whose rulings had shaped civil rights law for over a decade. And in exactly 12 minutes, every phone connected to her chambers, the U.S. Marshals Service, and a federal investigations unit would be ringing simultaneously. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you're watching from, and make sure to subscribe because the next story is one you don't want to miss. Officer Rick Tully was 43 years old and had spent 16 years with the Glenfield Police Department. In that time, 19 formal complaints had been filed against him. Racial profiling, excessive force, unlawful stops, every single one had been reviewed by Internal Affairs and dismissed. Tully had never been suspended, never been disciplined, never even been required to attend additional training. He had learned years ago that as long as he framed his actions as responding to suspicious behavior or protecting private property, the department would back him without question. Off-duty, Tully worked private security at Fontaine's Boutique, a high-end formal wear shop in a predominantly white suburb where prom dresses started at $800 and wedding gowns ran into the thousands. The boutique's owner had hired him specifically to maintain what she called the right atmosphere. Tully understood exactly what that meant. In 2 years of working the floor at Fontaine's, he had stopped, questioned, or removed 31 people, 29 of them were Black or Latino. Not one had ever been charged with a crime. He saw himself as the gatekeeper, the man who decided who belonged in spaces like this and who didn't. And on this particular Sunday afternoon, when a black woman in sneakers and a college sweatshirt walked through the front door with a teenage girl, Tully made his decision before they reached the first rack. Judge Nadine Calloway was not the kind of person who announced herself when she walked into a room. Outside the courtroom, she moved through the world quietly. No security detail, no driver, no entourage. She wore her authority on the bench and left it there when she stepped down. At 46, she sat on the United States Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, one of the most powerful federal courts in the country, just one step below the Supreme Court. Her rulings on civil rights, police accountability, and constitutional protections had been cited in legal textbooks and referenced in congressional hearings. But none of that had come easily. Nadine had grown up in a two-room apartment in southeast Washington, D.C., raised by a single mother named Vivian, who cleaned office buildings from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., 5 nights a week. Vivian never missed a parent-teacher conference. She never let Nadine see her tired. She pressed her daughter's school uniforms on a board balanced between the kitchen counter and the stove and told her the same thing every morning. "Be so good they can't look past you." Nadine listened. Full scholarship to Howard University, top of her class at Yale Law School, federal clerkship with a judge on the D.C. Circuit, 7 years of civil rights litigation with the ACLU, winning cases that forced police departments across 3 states to reform use-of-force policies. Appointed to the Fourth Circuit at 39 by presidential nomination, confirmed by the Senate with bipartisan support. But today, none of that existed. Today, she was just a mother in a college sweatshirt driving her daughter to a boutique she had found online, planning to surprise her with any prom dress she wanted. No budget, no restrictions, just a perfect afternoon with her child. Zora Calloway was 17 years old, a junior at Glenfield South Public High School, and the kind of kid who never made noise about who her mother was. Most of her classmates had no idea. She didn't post about it. She didn't bring it up in conversation. When college application essays asked about influential figures in her life, she wrote about her grandmother Vivian, not about a federal judge. Zora was quiet but sharp. She had been captain of the debate team since sophomore year and had placed second at the state championship the previous spring. She worked weekends babysitting for 2 families in her neighborhood and had been saving that money for months toward prom. She had $340 set aside, enough for a modest dress if she found the right sale. She had no idea her mother had been planning this trip for weeks. When Nadine told her that morning to get in the car without saying where they were going, Zora figured it was errands. When they pulled into the parking lot of Fontaine's boutique and her mother said, "Pick anything you want," Zora's eyes went wide. She had looked at this store online but never considered walking in. Everything in the window cost more than she made in a month. This was supposed to be the afternoon she would remember forever. The afternoon her mother made her feel like anything was possible. Instead, it became the afternoon Zora watched a man in a security uniform put her mother in handcuffs on a boutique floor while customers looked away and did nothing. Fontaine's boutique was the kind of store designed to make you feel like you were entering somewhere you had to earn the right to be. Floor-to-ceiling mirrors lined the walls. Crystal fixtures hung from the ceiling. The dresses were arranged by designer, each one displayed like a piece of art on padded velvet hangers with handwritten price tags tucked discreetly behind the fabric. The air smelled like gardenias and new carpet. A sales associate named Kristen met them 3 steps inside the door. Her smile was immediate and practiced. "Welcome to Fontaine's. Can I help you find something today?" Then her eyes moved, down to Nadine's sneakers, across the Howard sweatshirt, over to Zora's braids and ripped jeans. The smile didn't disappear, but it thinned. Her voice shifted just enough to notice. "We do have some lovely pieces on our sale rack toward the back, if you'd like to start there." She gestured past the designer gowns, past the bridal collection, toward a cramped corner near the stockroom where last season's markdowns hung under fluorescent lighting. Zora caught it. She looked at her mother. Nadine didn't flinch. She smiled politely, said thank you, "We'll browse on our own," and walked directly to the main collection. She pulled a beaded navy gown from the rack and held it up to Zora. Then a second dress, champagne-colored with a fitted bodice. Then a third. Zora was already smiling again. Near the entrance, Rick Tully shifted his weight and unclipped the radio from his belt. He pressed the button and spoke low enough that only the store manager on the other end could hear. "Got two in here that don't look right. I'm keeping eyes on them." He let the radio click off and folded his arms across his chest, watching them move through the store like they had every right to be there. 8 minutes later, Zora was inside a fitting room with the beaded navy gown, the one she had reached for first. Nadine stood outside the door, holding the other two dresses over her arm, waiting. She could hear Zora adjusting the zipper behind the curtain and whispering to herself. Through the gap at the bottom of the curtain, she could see her daughter turning slowly in front of the mirror. Nadine was smiling when the shadow crossed in front of her. Tully stopped less than 2 feet away. He didn't greet her. He didn't introduce himself. His eyes went straight to the dresses draped over her arm. "You have a receipt for those?" Nadine looked at him calmly. "I haven't purchased anything. I'm holding them for my daughter to try on. I'm going to need to see some ID. I'm a customer in a store. I'm not required to show identification while I shop." Tully didn't step back. He stepped closer. His hand moved to his belt, not to his weapon, but close enough to make the gesture unmistakable. "Ma'am, you match the description of a shoplifting suspect reported in this store earlier this week. I'm going to need you to put those dresses down and step toward the entrance." There had been no shoplifting report, no suspect description on file. Nothing matching Nadine or anyone who looked like her had been flagged in any system at any point in the store's recent history. Tully had invented it on the spot, the way he had done dozens of times before, because a black woman holding expensive dresses in a store like Fontaine's was all the probable cause he had ever needed. The fitting room curtain pulled back and Zora stepped out wearing the beaded navy gown. It fit perfectly, the kind of dress that makes a 17-year-old stand a little taller without trying. She had been smiling when she reached for the curtain. That smile lasted less than a second. What she saw was her mother pressed against a display case with a man twice her size gripping her left forearm hard enough to leave marks. Nadine's voice was steady but tight. "Remove your hand from me, now." Tully didn't remove it. He squeezed harder and leaned in. "You're not going anywhere until I say so. I've watched you moving through this store concealing merchandise, and I'm not asking anymore." Nadine had concealed nothing. Every dress she had touched was in plain sight, either in her hands or on the rack. Tully reached for his belt with his free hand and unclipped a pair of handcuffs. The metal sound cut through the silence of the store. Zora's hands were shaking, but she pulled her phone from the small bag she had carried into the fitting room and started recording. Tully's head snapped toward her. "Put that phone down right now. You are interfering with a security action." Zora didn't lower the phone. Her voice broke, but the words came out clear. "She didn't do anything. That's my mom. She didn't do anything." Tully ignored her. Around them, the boutique had gone completely still. A white woman near the bridal section pulled her teenage daughter close, grabbed her purse, and walked out of the store without looking back. 2 other customers stood frozen near the accessories wall, watching but saying nothing, doing nothing. Not one person stepped forward. Not one person said stop. Tully forced Nadine's arms behind her back and clicked the handcuffs shut in the middle of Fontaine's showroom floor. The sound echoed off the mirrors and marble tile. Nadine did not resist. She did not raise her voice. She stood still and let him do it because she knew, with the precision of a woman who had spent her career studying the law, that every second of compliance made his actions harder to defend. Zora was sobbing now. Her hands trembled around her phone, but she did not stop recording. The camera caught everything, the cuffs tightening, her mother's jaw locked shut, the faces of every customer in the store turning away. The boutique's store manager, a thin woman in a black blazer named Colette, appeared from the back office. She looked at Nadine in handcuffs, looked at Tully, and positioned herself directly behind him. "We have to protect our merchandise. We've had issues before, and Officer Tully is here for exactly this reason." She did not ask what had happened. She did not ask to see evidence. She did not look at Zora standing 5 feet away in a $1,200 gown with tears streaming down her face. Tully grabbed his radio and called for a patrol unit. I need backup at Fontaine's boutique on Ridgewood. One detained for suspected theft and trespass. Have a second individual on scene refusing to comply with instructions. The second individual was a 17-year-old girl in a prom dress holding a phone. While waiting for the unit, Tully pushed Nadine down into a chair near the entrance. He stood over her and spoke loud enough for the entire store to hear. People like you come in here thinking you can just take whatever you want. That's not how this works. Nadine looked up at him. She said nothing, but her eyes told him everything he was too arrogant to read. The patrol unit arrived in under 6 minutes. 2 uniformed officers walked through the front door of Fontaine's boutique. The first was Officer Denise Yamada, 36, 9 years on the force, one of only 4 women of color in the Glenfield Police Department. The second was Officer Kyle Pennington, 27, barely 2 years out of the academy, eager to prove himself and instinctively deferential to anyone with more time on the job. Yamada took in the scene in less than 3 seconds, a black woman in handcuffs sitting calmly in a chair by the entrance, a teenage girl in a formal gown standing 6 feet away, phone raised, face swollen from crying, a security officer with his chest puffed out and his hand still resting near his belt, and a store full of people pretending not to watch. Something was wrong, and Yamada felt it immediately. She approached Tully and spoke quietly. "Walk me through it. What's the probable cause?" Tully straightened up. She was acting suspicious from the moment she walked in. Wouldn't show ID when I asked. Got aggressive when I confronted her about merchandise she was trying to conceal. Yamada glanced at Nadine. The woman in the chair hadn't moved. Her posture was straight, her breathing even. She didn't look like someone who had been aggressive about anything. "Where's the concealed merchandise?" Yamada asked. Tully paused half a second too long. "She put it back when she saw me coming." Yamada turned to the store manager. "I want your security camera footage pulled from the last 30 minutes. Every angle you have." Colette shifted on her feet. "I'd need to check with the owner before I can release anything like that." "Pull the footage," Yamada said. It was not a request. Pennington, meanwhile, had positioned himself next to Tully. He nodded along as Tully repeated his version of events, already siding with the man who had 16 years on him without asking a single question of his own. Nadine sat still in the chair with her wrists locked behind her back and waited for a gap in the noise. When it came, she spoke. Her voice carried the tone of someone who had controlled courtrooms for a decade. Calm. Measured. Completely without panic. "I'd like to make a phone call." Tully turned and almost laughed. "You can make all the calls you want from booking once transport gets here." Yamada stepped between them. "She's detained, not arrested. She has every right to make a call." Tully opened his mouth to respond, but Yamada had already turned away from him. She looked at Zora. "Can you hand your mother her phone?" Zora lowered her own phone just long enough to pull Nadine's from the small crossbody bag hanging off the chair. Her hands were still shaking. She held the phone up to her mother's ear since Nadine's hands were still cuffed behind her. Nadine spoke clearly and without hesitation. "This is Judge Calloway. I need you to listen carefully. I am currently being detained in handcuffs at a retail establishment in Glenfield. The address is 412 Ridgewood Lane, Fontaine's boutique. I need you to contact the U.S. Marshal's Service, notify Chief Judge Harlan's office, and reach David on his personal line. I want a record of this call, logged in chambers immediately. 90 seconds. That was all it took." On the other end of the line, her chief clerk had already picked up a second phone. Within moments, 3 separate lines of communication were active. The Marshal's Service was alerted. The Chief Judge of the Fourth Circuit was being briefed. A personal attorney was en route. Across the boutique floor, Tully had gone quiet. He hadn't caught every word, but he had caught enough. Fourth Circuit. Chambers. Marshal notification. His arms unfolded slowly. His jaw tightened. He didn't know exactly what was coming, but for the first time since he had walked up to Nadine Calloway and grabbed her arm, the certainty in his posture was gone. Exactly 11 minutes after Nadine's phone call ended, a black SUV with federal plates pulled to the curb outside Fontaine's boutique. Two men in dark suits stepped out and walked through the front door without hesitation. The first, Deputy U.S. Marshal Vincent Osei, was tall and broad-shouldered, with a credentials case already open in his left hand. The second marshal stayed one step behind, scanning the room with the kind of quiet authority that made every person in the store instinctively stand straighter. Osei stopped in the center of the showroom floor. His voice was not loud, but it filled every corner. "I'm Deputy U.S. Marshal Osei. Who is in charge of this detention?" Tully stepped forward. His badge was still clipped to his belt. His chest was still out. But his voice had lost the edge it carried 20 minutes earlier. "I'm the one who made the stop. Officer Rick Tully, Glenfield PD, working private security for the store." Osei didn't blink. "Officer Tully, you are currently detaining a sitting federal judge of the United States Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit. You will remove the restraints from Judge Calloway immediately." The boutique went silent. Not the kind of silence that falls when people stop talking. The kind that falls when the air itself seems to freeze. Tully's face lost its color in stages. First the confidence drained, then the posture collapsed. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. Behind him, Colette, the store manager, took 2 full steps backward, as if distance alone could separate her from what she had endorsed. Pennington moved first. He stepped toward Nadine with his hands trembling, fumbled the key into the cuffs, and released them. The metal fell away from her wrists with a click that sounded louder than it should have. Yamada stood apart near the fitting rooms, arms at her sides. She had not uncuffed Nadine because she had not been the one to cuff her, but the look on her face made it clear she had seen the shape of this moment long before it arrived. Nadine stood slowly. She rubbed the red marks circling both wrists, looked once at Tully, once at Colette, and said nothing. Zora stood behind her, phone still raised, still recording. She had not stopped since the fitting room. Marshal Osei did not wait for explanations. He turned to Colette and spoke in a tone that left no room for negotiation. "I need the complete security camera footage from every angle in this store covering the last 60 minutes. Every camera. No exceptions. That footage is now part of a federal record." Colette nodded quickly and disappeared into the back office without a word. Tully tried to fill the silence. "Look, I was doing my job." She was behaving suspiciously, and she wouldn't cooperate. I had no way of knowing who she was. I followed protocol, and Osei turned to face him. "Let me be clear about something, officer. Her title is not what makes this wrong. If she were a teacher, a nurse, or a woman with no title at all, your actions would be exactly as indefensible as they are right now. Her position did not determine whether her rights were violated. You did." Tully closed his mouth. Osei told him he was not to leave the premises. The second marshal was already on a phone call to Glenfield PD dispatch, requesting Tully's commanding officer respond to the scene. Within 40 minutes, the boutique's full security footage had been copied onto a federal evidence drive. Zora's phone video, still running when the marshals walked in, was backed up and logged as a secondary record. Both files were in the hands of federal investigators before the hour was out. Near the front of the store, Colette approached Nadine. Her hands were clasped in front of her, and her voice had dropped to something barely above a whisper. "Judge Calloway, I want to sincerely apologize. This was a terrible misunderstanding, and I never intended." Nadine looked at her. The same eyes that had silenced attorneys in federal courtrooms settled on the woman who had stood behind Tully and told a handcuffed mother that they had to protect their merchandise. "You stood behind him," Nadine said, "while my daughter watched. Remember that." Colette said nothing else. There was nothing left to say. The investigation moved fast because the evidence didn't require interpretation. It required nothing more than someone finally willing to look. Federal investigators in Glenfield PD Internal Affairs launched parallel inquiries within 48 hours of the incident. The FBI's Civil Rights Division opened a preliminary review. The Department of Justice flagged the case for potential pattern or practice violations. And for the first time in 16 years, someone pulled Rick Tully's full complaint history out of the filing cabinet where it had been buried and read every single page. 19 complaints, 11 years. Each one documented the same behavior. Black and Latino individuals stopped without cause, ID demanded without legal basis, physical contact initiated without provocation, accusations of theft or trespassing made with no supporting evidence, and every single complaint had been reviewed by the same internal affairs unit and closed with the same language, insufficient evidence to sustain. Consistent with department policy, no further action recommended. But the body camera footage told a different story. Investigators reviewed over 40 hours of recordings from Tully's on-duty shifts and found a pattern so consistent it barely needed analysis. In affluent commercial areas, Tully approached Black and Latino shoppers at a rate 7 times higher than white shoppers in the same locations. His language changed depending on the race of the person he was addressing. His hands went to his belt faster. His tone hardened sooner. It was not unconscious. It was a system. Then the boutique records broke open. Fontaine's internal incident logs showed that Tully had stopped, questioned, ejected, or detained 31 individuals during his 2 years as private security. 29 of them were Black or Latino. Not one of the 31 had ever been charged with a crime. Not one had been found in possession of stolen merchandise. Not one had been convicted of anything. 8 former victims came forward within the first 2 weeks, each describing nearly identical encounters. Stopped without explanation, accused without evidence, humiliated in front of other customers, and escorted out while white shoppers watched in silence. The investigation went deeper. Federal subpoenas pulled Fontaine's internal emails and revealed a written directive from the boutique's owner to Colette and to Tully, instructing them to apply what the emails called enhanced screening protocols to shoppers who fit certain profiles. The language was coded but unmistakable. Non-traditional clientele, atypical demographic presentation, loss prevention priority indicators. Every phrase meant the same thing. Black and brown customers were to be watched, followed, and confronted if they lingered too long near high-value merchandise. It was not a misunderstanding. It was a policy. The consequences came in waves, and each one was heavier than the last. Rick Tully was terminated from the Glenfield Police Department within 10 days of the incident. His badge was collected. His service weapon was surrendered. His access to every law enforcement database in the state was revoked. 2 weeks later, a federal grand jury returned an indictment. The charge was deprivation of rights under color of law, a federal civil rights violation carrying a maximum sentence of 10 years. Prosecutors argued that Tully had used his authority as a sworn officer to unlawfully detain, restrain, and humiliate a citizen based on race while acting in a security capacity directly tied to his law enforcement credentials. Officer Kyle Pennington, the young backup who had stood beside Tully and nodded along without asking a single question of his own, was suspended without pay pending a departmental review. He resigned before the review concluded. His brief career ended not with a dramatic act of misconduct, but with the quiet realization that standing next to the wrong man and saying nothing carried its own weight. Officer Denise Yamada was formally commended by the department and later promoted to sergeant. The commendation cited her adherence to proper procedure, her insistence on reviewing evidence before drawing conclusions, and her decision to allow Nadine her phone call over Tully's objection. It was the only part of the department's response that didn't require an apology. The Glenfield chief of police resigned 5 weeks after the incident when a federal review confirmed that internal affairs had systematically suppressed or dismissed complaints against Tully and at least 4 other officers over a period spanning more than a decade. The pattern was not an oversight, it was institutional. Fontaine's boutique was hit with a federal civil rights lawsuit filed on behalf of Nadine and Zora Calloway. A separate class action followed, filed by 9 former victims who had been unlawfully stopped or removed from the store based on race. The boutique's owner issued a public apology through her attorney, calling the incidents deeply regrettable and inconsistent with the values of the business. The apology convinced no one. Within 3 months, a national boycott campaign had drained the store's revenue to near zero. Fontaine's boutique closed permanently 6 months after the day Nadine Calloway walked through its doors. The city of Glenfield, facing mounting legal exposure and national scrutiny, entered settlement negotiations. The final amount was $2.4 million, paid to the Calloway family. It was the largest civil rights settlement in the city's history. But for Nadine, the money was never the point. The record was, Zora never bought a dress that day. She walked out of Fontaine still wearing the navy gown because no one had thought to ask her to change before the marshals arrived. Nadine draped her jacket over Zora's shoulders in the parking lot and drove home in silence. Neither of them spoke for the entire ride. 3 weeks later, a package arrived at the Calloway home. No return address. Inside was a custom-made gown, deep emerald green with hand-stitched beadwork along the bodice and a handwritten note folded beneath the tissue paper. For Zora, you stood your ground when grown men wouldn't. Wear this and know that we see you. It was signed Sisters at Law. 14 black women attorneys from across 3 states had seen the video and commissioned the dress together. On prom night, Zora came down the stairs in the emerald gown with her grandmother Vivian's bracelet on her wrist. Nadine stood at the bottom holding her phone, and for the first time since the boutique, her composure broke. She whispered it just loud enough for Zora to hear. "You were braver than me in that store." Zora shook her head. "I learned it from you." The video was viewed over 10 million times in 4 weeks. It was cited in 3 congressional inquiries into police misconduct. When Judge Calloway returned to the bench, her first case involved a civil rights claim nearly identical to her own experience. She recused herself but entered a written statement into the public record. If a federal judge can be handcuffed without cause in a dress shop in broad daylight, then no citizen is safe from the unchecked exercise of biased authority. The final frame of Zora's footage became the defining image. A mother in handcuffs, a daughter in a prom dress. A phone held steady with both hands. She wasn't just a mother buying a dress, she was the law, and he broke it. If this story moved you, don't just watch in silence. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to see how power, racism, and accountability collide in